So good afternoon, everyone. I think a couple of people are going to start to filter through, so I might give it a minute or two. But a very warm welcome to Enterprise Ireland's webinar and Northern Horizons, exploring the hospitality landscape in the north of England. So over the next 60 minutes, we have quite a busy agenda. So I hope you're feeling refreshed after lunch and have a cup of coffee in hand and ready to kind of kick off the session. My name is Clodagh Dolan and I'm a market executive with Enterprise Ireland for travel technology and also e-commerce based in our London office. So before we begin today, I'm going to run through today's agenda on the next slide. So firstly, I'm going to give a quick introduction to Enterprise Ireland and the work that we do here in the UK. We'll then hear from Sarah Duignan, Director of Client Relationships at STR, who are one of the leading providers of data on the global hospitality industry. So we're delighted to have Sarah with us this afternoon as she provides a wealth of knowledge on the current state of the UK hospitality sector. So going to really set that scene. Following that, we'll engage in about a 35-minute discussion with our esteemed panel of experts, and then conclude with a 5-minute Q&A session and wrap up. So just some housekeeping details. If you've registered for today's webinar, you will receive an email tomorrow from myself containing the recording and also the slides. So Sarah has very kindly agreed to share those slides with attendees today. Your cameras and microphones will remain muted and we can't see you throughout the session. However, we would really encourage your active participation through the Q&A box at the end of your screen. So if you have any kind of burning questions throughout the session, please throw them in there and we'll do our best to answer all your queries by the end of the session. If you've answered them not anonymously, I'll pick up with any questions that haven't been answered throughout the session. So just starting with Enterprise Ireland, some of you might be familiar with us, but for those of you who aren't, we are the trade and innovation agency for the Irish government, supporting Irish SMEs as they expand into global markets. So here in the UK, I work closely with a diverse group of Irish tech businesses. So they're targeting the hospitality market. So for example, hotel booking platforms, food data management businesses, and HR solutions tailored specifically at the hotel sector. So we've chosen today to focus on the hospitality industry due to the sizable opportunity the sector provides for Irish businesses we work with. While the industry has gone through kind of many challenges over the last number of years, Brexit being one, COVID-19 another, and now the height of the labour shortages, we believe that within those challenges, there are potential opportunities. So it makes it an exciting time and quite interesting time to be discussing the sector. And moving on to kind of my last slide here is with our 50 offices around the world and working also with our 4,000 clients, our mission is to accelerate the growth of Irish companies in global markets. So our vision is for Ireland to develop world-class solutions to address global problems. So we work day in, day out with these innovative businesses. And if you're interested in learning more about these enterprises and what they're doing at the moment in the UK, I'd be very happy to discuss them with you in a separate conversation after today's session. So that's enough from me. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sarah Duignan, our first speaker, who will provide us with some valuable insights today from STR.
Perfect. Thank you, Clodagh. Delighted to be with you all today. Much like Clodagh, I am also an Irish national living in the UK. So I'm based in London and the STR offices right behind the Tate Modern. Much like many expats, I had a plan 18 years ago to come to London and make my fortune. I'm still in London and I didn't quite make it in 2 years, but let's just say I'm good at other things. So thank you for the introduction, Clodagh. What we do at STR is we collect hotel performance data, actual data from about 77,000 hotels worldwide. My primary remit is Europe and the Middle East. So I spend a lot of time in Ireland, a lot of time all over Europe, and a significant amount of my time across the Middle Eastern markets. Today, we're going to focus on everywhere around the world, given that is a source of not only incoming guests, but of course, exploring different opportunities around the world. So I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to focus in a little bit on the north of England. So if we look at the globe, first of all, I'm going to talk a lot today about indexing, and essentially what I'm referring back to is where we were in 2019. Now, it's often been discussed that 2019 wasn't necessarily the best year for the hospitality industry in all locations of the world. So in the case of Ireland, for example, one could argue that 2018 was a better performing year for the Irish hotel industry or hospitality industry. But just as a common practice for the globe, we are looking back to 2019. So if we look at a global picture, first of all, what you want to see on this slide is you want to see each of these little tower charts meeting that horizontal green line. And that will be telling us that global demand is back to exactly where it was in 2019. So the good news here is that we have just surpassed that magic green line, and we are now back in a growth trajectory. So we have more customers coming into the various markets around the world than we had at the same time, 19. And this is year to date, May, so the first 5 months to May. If you look at that, what that means for occupancy, so how many rooms were occupied, obviously it's not a static number that we're looking at. There have, of course, been new openings through that time period. So new hotels opened, maybe hotels that were planned during COVID or planned pre-COVID, didn't quite make it to opening. There are several of those around the world. So it's a constantly evolving landscape. And we capture data for 77,000 of those hotels globally. So we're just a couple of percentage points away from an occupancy equal to what we've seen in the first 5 months of 2019. Now, what does that mean if we look at the UK? Well, the UK, generally speaking, bucked that trend. So the UK recovered faster than many other locations around the world, but also around Europe. We had lockdown for a significant period of time, but for shorter, in some cases, 3 weeks, albeit for the Irish market. Shorter and longer in others. So places like Dubai really only had a 6-week of lockdown period, what we would truthfully call lockdown. So the UK did kind of come out of the gap much faster, and it enabled the UK to recoup and now subsequently grow demand much earlier on in the game. So growing demand since the latter part of last year. Similar picture then for occupancy. So where occupancy is now ahead of what we've seen in 2019. So who are some of those drivers of the demand that's coming into the European market? Well, Americans have never been more important for our markets. If we look from the top and on a sliding scale between Dublin and Munich, you'll see that over 14% of all of the demand going into the hotels in the Dublin market are coming from American guests. And that is particularly strong this year with the strength of the dollar. And there's a lot more prepayment happening over the last kind of 6 to 12 months. So where Americans are booking maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months in advance, but saying, please charge my card now, as they want to benefit from the strong dollar against the euro. Now, some of the British markets then there, you'll see London, and not too shabby, just hovering on the cusp of 12% of all guests coming into the London market are coming from Americans. Edinburgh is heading towards double digits, about 9.5%. And then not to be forgotten, Belfast is sitting at about 7.5%. But you see the various markets across Europe that really have quite a decent dependency on American guests. Americans were one piece of the puzzle that we were missing coming out of COVID. So we've seen the domestic demand grow first, and I mean domestic within the UK. That expanded then out into continental Europe. We started to see Americans grow then next. And now the missing piece of the puzzle is China. And that too is returning. And you'll see in partnership with our colleagues at Tourism Economics, some of the data that they produce around the outbound overnight. So you'll see in 2019, this is where we've seen the highest amount of Americans Chinese coming into the European market. And believe it or not, we expect that to recoup to about a third of what it was in 2019 by year end 2023, to grow significantly again next year, and then to actually be surpassing that number come 2025, which really is a very positive outlook, given that China really only properly reopened for international travel earlier this year. What's that mean around the globe? So we're back to kind of straight performance here. So 64% of all rooms available for sale in Europe were sold so far for the first 5 months of this year. That's about 5 percentage points behind what we've seen same time in 19. If you look over in mainland China, which is obviously where COVID began, it's a very similar picture, much bigger market, but 62%, about 3% behind. And then our North American friends in a very, very similar picture, very similar patterns, 62 and 4% behind. There's three, should I say, fully recovered markets. One of those is the Middle East. So exactly the same occupancy in the Middle East for the first 5 months of 23 compared to the same time in 19. So you'll see there's 0% change. So exactly where they were in 2019, no mean feat in the Middle East, given the sheer amount of new supply coming into that market. Some of the gateway cities, what you want to see here is that rather kind of garish, bright green color, where you're seeing growth or at least return to occupancy that we experienced pre-COVID. So Paris is right back to where it was pre-COVID-19. Rome is about 1 percentage point ahead. Places like Jeddah, 17% ahead. Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, about 20% ahead as well. And then you'll see other locations, London being one, Madrid another, Moscow, Delhi, Singapore, etc. The darker green, where we're not quite back to that magic 100 number, but we are very, very close. And then the further east you go, just in a different place in the cycle as we get towards, whether it's Shanghai or Beijing or even in Hong Kong. So remember, restrictions in place for a much longer period of time and international borders not opened as soon. What's that mean for average rate? So on average, what do customers pay for a hotel room in each of these different locations? On average in Europe, a hotel room will set you back about 142 euros. That is across all classes, whether it's a budget economy room right up to the luxury 5-star properties, which is about a 26% increase on what you would have paid in 2019. Now, the caption kind of gives you a word of warning. Remember inflation. So none of these numbers are inflation adjusted. And inflation, as you all know, varies in various different locations around Europe. It's somewhere around kind of 8.5% in the UK, something similar in Ireland. But think about somewhere like Poland, where it's sitting at about 17, heading towards 18%. So if you strip out and do some really dirty maths on the 26% increase that you're seeing here, you'll find that the increases are really single digits and maybe low double digits when you take out the inflationary impact. Similar picture in North America, albeit in US dollars. So 156 US dollars and about 19% ahead of 19. Middle East, pretty deep pockets with 188 and 27% ahead of 2019. Some of the key global locations then, and very, very different picture. If you look at this slide out of context, you're thinking, wow, owners, operators, and hotels are really doing a fantastic job when it comes to average rate. But again, inflation is not adjusted on these numbers. This is not all profit going into their respective pockets. And then if we look at Europe over time, the blue tower blocks you're seeing here is the average rate percentage change, and the green is the occupancy. And then the purple line that you're seeing throughout is something that we call RevPAR, so revenue per available room. And that's the combination of the two. So kind of I would summarize the view that you're seeing here as RevPAR is still being driven by average rate, so average rate growth and full recovery, but we do still need to see more customers coming into our hotels. So let me move on to the UK. The UK is definitely more than okay, despite everything that's happening, whether it's political or economic. And if we look at how the UK stacks up against some of the European counterparts, it's in a pretty positive place. So you'll see I've just kind of bolded out the UK numbers there. And again, you want to be at least meeting the kind of grey horizontal line or growing beyond that line. So you'll see the UK is now back in a growth trajectory for occupancy. So too is Ireland, and so too is Italy. Italy was below that bottom line, still trying to recoup their 2019 numbers for a much longer period of time. It was, of course, the first place that COVID-19 was identified in within the European countries. And then you'll see the likes of Poland. So you've had a bit of a kind of roller coaster in Poland. They did see some of the Ukrainian business and the journalists and the various different humanitarian efforts and people staying in Poland, given its proximity to Ukraine. And then inflation is also biting at the Polish market. Likewise with Germany, where there was actually lateral flow requirements, so test requirements still up until about 14 months ago. So for a much longer period of time than anywhere. It was the only place after actually the US that there was still lateral flow test requirements to enter. If you look at the UK then overall, so you'll see it is, I'll summarise this as we just need more bodies coming into the UK. So average rate is in a really positive place. Occupancy is not positive every day or every month of every day of every month, but it is certainly kind of hovering on that horizontal line. So we are seeing growth across the average rate and RevPAR. And then if you look at the UK in its entirety, this is very much a tale of two halves, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. So it is average rate led, and occupancy since March has now fully recovered and is now back in growth. And that's if you look at the UK in its entirety. But I mentioned the tale of two halves, and the tale of two halves is as follows. Because if you just look at regional UK, which we define as everything outside of London, it's actually the regions that is leading and kind of pushing the UK overall numbers forward. So you've seen stronger occupancy growth in regional UK. So as we've seen coming out of COVID, much more staycations, whether you were going to Cornwall or Dorset, and there was less of a propensity to travel into the big cities. If you look at that same number then for London, still doing very well from an average rate standpoint, but we do need more of that, especially the international demand, especially in the group segment and in the corporate segment to return to the capital market. Some of the other locations then around the UK, same principle here as you look at occupancy. There's some nice kind of shoots of growth if you look at Aberdeen and Edinburgh, so growing 6% and 1% respectively. Glasgow not quite there yet, but very, very close. If you hop across the pond to Belfast, about 9 percentage points ahead of where it was in 2019, helped in no small way by two things. One being that there are 4 hotels that are currently completely closed and being utilised for humanitarian purposes. And the second is that there's been very limited new supply going into the Belfast market. You'll see some then that are still kind of trying to catch up. So Liverpool about 7% behind where they were in 19, Cardiff 4, Bristol 5 and London 5 as well. And Dublin on the cusp of full recovery, just another 2 percentage points to go. Pretty confident that will come through as we go through the summer months. If we look at average rate then, very similar picture to what we've seen on the global picture. It is a sea of the bright green, so growth across the board. Again, not inflation adjusted for any of these locations that you're seeing here, but all well into double digits and some even beyond that. And then RevPAR principally being led by average rate, although in some cases it is the culmination of occupancy and average rate. So is it all rosy in the garden? Well, yes and no is the answer to that question, because you'll see along the right-hand side in the chart that you're seeing occupancy is positive, back growing, or just fully recovered, average rate is growing, RevPAR, etc. TrevPAR, though, your total revenue per available room, so where you bring in your whole food and beverage element, is just 1 percentage point ahead. But the all-important GOPAR, or your gross operating profit, the profit that goes into your pocket at the end of the day, is actually still behind what we were looking at in the earlier part of 2019. So that's really on the back of, Claude talked a little bit about some of this, costs increasing, the cost of labour, the cost of electricity, water, gas, you name it, everything seems to be going up. So expenses, so whilst we're growing average rate in the top line and growing your incoming revenues, of course, the outgoings too are increasing, affecting that profit number on the bottom line. London compared to the region UK, how we came out of COVID was the regions led the way. I've mentioned that already. And it took London quite some time to follow suit. So we still need a lot more of that international demand coming through. We've seen those peaks there during Easter. It looks like it's into May on the slide, but it is actually the Easter peak that we're seeing with school holidays and whatnot. Average rate, a whole other ball game. Huge hikes, especially as we went through kind of the run up to Christmas and through New Year across the country. And then that, of course, culminated in positive revenue per available room, being the mixture of both occupancy and average rate. Just a couple of kind of fun things to share. We talk often about how expensive London is and how it's the capital city, and it's sometimes not unusual that it's expensive, but it's a couple of things to compare here. So we're looking here at the impact of the Eurovision final, which obviously ultimately took place in Liverpool. And you've seen that during that week-long period, because there was, of course, some pre and post events happening, Liverpool achieved an occupancy of 91% and an average rate of £234. Whereas Coronation Week, when King Charles was coronated, achieved 75% occupancy. Granted, London is a much bigger market than Liverpool to fill, and a £239 average rate. So what that resulted in is that, yes, we've seen pretty hefty hikes across all the different classes in Liverpool on the left-hand side, so the night Eurovision being the 13th of May, and really substantial lifts in average rate over that week-long period. Whereas in London, whilst we've seen pretty substantial lifts in average rate, we actually experienced some displacement in demand, where people said, whether they were corporates or whether indeed leisure guests, decided that they maybe wouldn't come to London during that week, given that everything was a lot more expensive. What's that mean then on weekdays versus weekends? Weekends have started to dip ever so slightly. I would actually call that normalized as opposed to declines. You'll see your shoulders are your Sundays and your Thursday night, your weekdays, are Monday through Wednesday on in the middle there, and then your weekends and the Friday and Saturday night. Average rate, though, continues to grow. It's still about 10% ahead of last year, of 2022. And then if we look at some of the key locations, just kind of focus in on the north of England markets, you'll see pretty much all locations are either ahead of where they were last year. So you're seeing the various different years, 19, 20, 21, 22, and then the first 5 months of 23. So occupancy either on par with what we've seen in last year, whether you're looking at Manchester or Leeds or Newcastle or York, or slightly ahead. And then average rate, again, on par, or even in the case of Liverpool, certainly pushed by Eurovision there, if you're looking at the year to date, well ahead, and York really capitalising on some of that leisure demand. Just some of the other locations we can report on in the north of England. The Bolton-Wigan market is certainly ahead for occupancy again this year, and then the remainder, Hull well ahead, and Chester also. So really coming back to more normalised performance that we would ordinarily see had we not experienced COVID-19. You'll see there are some blanks, just in case you're wondering if that was an error. It's not. We're very, very pernickety and very secure as it comes to data at STR. So if there's not sufficient reporting hotels, where many hotels were closed during the 2020 period, we do, of course, blank out that data. And then a very similar picture for average rate. So all on par with last year. So coming into a much more normalized time of year. Just look at those side by side. You can just kind of see very, very clearly 19 versus 2023. And as Clodagh said, we will share these slides afterwards to consume at a slightly slower pace. And then likewise for average rate, it's varying anywhere between £7 to £17 higher than the same point in 2019. Finally, just quickly looking ahead, there's always new supply in any market around the world. The UK is no different. And before I give anybody on the call a heart attack, yes, there are 89,000 rooms that are, 98,000 rooms that are in various different stages of pipeline for the UK. But that includes everything from planning, final planning, right up to under construction. If all of those rooms were to come to fruition, you'll see that kind of light orange that you're seeing at the top. That would result in an additional 25,000 keys coming into the UK market. You'll see Manchester would increase by about a third, Blackpool likewise about a third of a lift, and Cardiff also. Double-digit increase across many of the regions, just removing the London impact so you can just see a little bit more clearly some of the more regional locations. However, the real story is that just shy of 12,000 of those rooms are under construction, which is about 50% just shy of 50% of the overall pipeline. Manchester about 1,800 rooms, Glasgow just about to hit the 2,000 mark, and about another 500 in the pipeline, or under construction, in the Belfast market. So that's what I call the real story. So if we look and kind of apply some averages and apply some experience from the past, across the UK, we do expect about 10,000 new rooms to open, some that have opened already in 23, but over the remainder of 23 to bring that number to 10,000, another 10,000 in 24, and another 10,000 in 2025. So averaging about 10,000 per annum over the remainder of this year and into the next 2 years. Occupancy on the books then for some of the key locations. This is real occupancy in the books. It's full inventory. London sitting in a not too shabby. This is as at the 26th of June for the next 90 days. And that blue line that you're seeing throughout the time series is just comparing it to same time last year. So really, really strong performance, whether you're in London or whether you're in Liverpool and Manchester, and in many cases ahead of what we've seen last year. Similar picture in Leeds, Newcastle and York. So domestic demand still very, very strong. And then finally on the forecast, so we do forecast for numerous markets across the UK, but just giving you a view on UK in its entirety. We expect demand to continue to be strong right out and to continue to grow right out to 2027, for average rate and RevPAR to follow suit, and for occupancy to finally get above that magic 100 number, and to not only fully recover, but also to start to grow. So Claude, I think it's back to you. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Sarah. So if you just stop sharing your slides there, that'd be fantastic. Yeah. And I'd just like to welcome Tony and Fergus as well to turn on their cameras and unmute so we can get the next conversation kind of started. And thank you, Sarah, for that insightful presentation. I'm sure we'll be touching on different parts of that as we go through our conversation now. So I suppose to begin, I'd like to kind of ask the panel to introduce themselves and provide an overview of their background in the hospitality industry to date. So Tony, I might start with you because I know you've worked both on the restaurant side from operations and now in catering. So it'd be great to kind of hear about your journey in the industry.
Yes, hi, Clodagh, and hi, everybody. Yeah, I've been in the hospitality business now for just over 30 years. Starting as a chef for the Campanile Hotel Group, and then moving into pubs and restaurants latterly in my career. I've worked with some high street brands that you may recognise, like Slug Lettuce, Fiesta Havana, and Tasca restaurants. Some of those were national roles and some were regional. Most recently, I worked for a late night leisure business called Atmosphere Bars and Clubs that had community nightclubs and branded late night venues up and down the UK. And I'm now at a contract catering business in the north of England.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tony. I might jump on to you next, Fergus, because I know you've worked with some impressive brands, mainly in the tech side.
Yeah, certainly. I'm also Irish, Northern Irish diaspora. I also kind of ran away from the home country a few years ago. I'm Queen's Belfast, for anyone else on the line who knows that. Hospitality, I think it's 12 years now. Airlines, 22 years. So I'm kind of hotels with wings, hotels without wings, but always hospitality, travel, transportation. Most recently, I was head of IT for Soho House membership group. And one of their hotels is opening, or houses is opening in Manchester till end of this year. These days I'm more freelancing, doing tech stack reviews. Before Soho, I was Red Carnation, so 5-star luxury, 17, 18 hotels globally, a bit of village hotels and Yotel, a lovely little 3.5-star millennial hotel brand. So yeah, and mostly experience in IT and e-commerce and a lot of kind of digital strategy.
Brilliant. Thanks, Marion Fergus. And then Sarah, I know you've mentioned ST, or obviously you've been working there, but I suppose, have you always been in the hospitality industry?
I have. I am not I did not do hotel school, which is often a shock to a lot of people. I'm not a Shannon or an EHL or a La Roche graduate. I did an undergraduate in DCU in applied languages, German and Spanish, and I dabbled in investment banking in the States for a while. But hospitality and hotel operations is my background. So I'm from Leitrim originally. So any of you that ever gone to a wedding in Leitrim have either gone to the Landmark Hotel in Carrick-on-Shannon or to Lochrain Castle. So I was on the opening team in the Landmark in Carrick-on-Shannon for several years, and the Grand Hotel in Mellors before I came to Deloitte and subsequently STR. So yes, pretty much entirely hospitality, born and bred almost.
Fantastic, thanks, Sarah. So I suppose we're going to jump into some questions now and kind of kick off our discussion. So I'm going to start with kind of a broad question first, and I suppose based on some of the insights Sarah touched on and the data, we've seen some locations in the north of England exceed their ADR and also their occupancy rates pre-pandemic. So I suppose from the panel's perspective, I'd like to open it up and kind of see as what you see as the key opportunities in the hospitality sector in the north of England, and maybe starting off generally, but if you would focus in a little bit on the north of England as well. So I'm not sure if anyone wants to jump in.
I'll start if you don't mind. Yeah, it was interesting seeing those stats there, and I guess that sort of backs up some of my experiences over the years, but certainly of late. I guess in the north, it's quite a rich place for tourism and hospitality. No surprises there, but there's quite a lot to do in the north. From key events in the arts and music, lots of big music events and activities going on. But there's lots of World Heritage sites as well. There's lots of places for people to go and visit. From York Minster, Durham Cathedral, etc., etc. There's lots of places to visit in the north. I guess in my experience, from a general perspective, the north seems to be a test bed for hospitality organisations to start out their businesses and then expand south. Now, as to why that is, that could be rent and rates driven. That could be just tested out small before you end up going to London. I'm not entirely sure, but there's several examples of organisations that have done that over the years. From the company I used to work for, the Tasca restaurants, who started on Deansgate in Manchester and expanded across the country, to Mowgli, which is becoming a well-known Indian street food restaurant business that also started in Liverpool and is now across the UK. To Greg's, Malmaison, Brewdog, there's a list of northern-based hospitality businesses who made their mark in the north and who expanded across the UK once they'd tested their concept and got a successful business under their belt. As to why that is and what's driving people to the north in terms of those opportunities, well, Sarah, you mentioned the Eurovision contest being hosted in Liverpool. We seem to do quite well in the north for gaining special events. We look at the Capital of Culture as an example. We had Glasgow awarded Capital of Culture in 1990, Liverpool 2008, Hull in 2017. These activities, these cultural activities, really drive revenue and have a knock-on effect then for hospitality businesses. It was reported Liverpool brought in an extra £750 million through being awarded Capital of Culture, Hull 300 million. So these events, these activities really have a knock-on effect to the hospitality industry. And maybe that's why a lot of startups have had some real success in the north before then expanding south.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tony. I'd like to kind of pass it on to either Fergus or Sarah, maybe to kind of give your input on what Tony said as to maybe if you agree or disagree.
Sarah, ladies first, and I'll go second.
Yeah, I totally agree. I spent a good bit of time in the north of England. I spent, like I said in the beginning, I came to London 18 years ago. And whether it's infrastructure like the port at Birkenhead, which is unrecognisable compared to what it was 18 years ago. And I think it's ferry travel, whilst people associate that, as I've learned to my detriment, with older people travelling, which I would greatly argue. I think it's a very important source of being able to bring consumers into the north of England, whether it's into Liverpool or whether it's into any of the ports around the UK in general. So all of the rejuvenation that has happened, whether it's in Liverpool, whether it's in Manchester. I know Birmingham is more the Midlands, but a lot of rejuvenation has gone there as well. Airlift is a huge one. I've gone a couple of times out of Manchester to the Middle East it's not always been possible direct. But I think that's opening up a whole other kind of, means of bringing customers in. I totally agree with Tony. There's so much to do in the north of England that I think a lot of people either don't explore or don't know that it's there to explore. So maybe the marketing efforts need to continue to keep the north of England on the map. Thanks, Fergus.
Totally, and I'd agree with that. I think the main benefit of the north of England is that it is not the crowded south. It's not London. I think make the most of that. I would say go for experience-driven stays. Big sky country, big country. And by that I mean rooms plus food and beverage plus events plus spa, whether it's paddle boarding or dog walking or fat biking, etc. I'm helping hotels in Cumbria who are doing extremely well. They did during COVID, and they've kept that kind of mantra. I'm helping a hotel in Scotland, and it's a place to get away to. There's a lot, I see a lot as well. The apart hotels are kind of doing extremely well in the north. Rooms, kind of that's their heartland basically, the whole new concept. And Room 2, Cove, a lot of extended stay, mixed business leisure, people kind of retiring or working rather where there's a great broadband and a great view, and that's really all that matters. I'd also say part of the experience-driven stay is dog-friendly. Most of the hotels I work with make almost as much money as they do from food and beverage as in dogs, this food and beverage, because dogs are kind of an upsell opportunity. I didn't even know until about a year ago there are OTA from dog-friendly OTAs. You can literally just go around the country and just go to somewhere that will have a very good dog experience for you. So yeah, if there are any kind of tech companies on the line, get your experience-driven stays sorted, sort out your IBEs, internet booking engines, make sure it's an all-in-one, single customer portfolio-driven thing. But yeah, north of England, maximize the fact that you're not the crowded south.
Perfect, thank you, Fergus. And I suppose kind of turning that question a little bit on its head, we've talked about kind of the optimistic outlook of the UK. With most of the kind of locations on the verge of recovering or have already recovered. But that figure that I suppose Sarah mentioned on the go part is kind of highlighting maybe some of the challenges that are still there. So I know staffing shortages is a massive one. I know Kate Nichols from UK Hospitality is kind of talking about this a lot this week, that it's 48% higher than pre-COVID. I suppose from your perspective, what are kind of the challenges the UK hospitality are facing at the moment? And are there any kind of specific challenges that maybe the north of England are facing more than the south?
Yeah, I'll maybe start this one again if we go in that cycle. Again, I don't think what we're experiencing in the north is too different to what's being experienced across the rest of the country in terms of labour shortages, cost of living crisis, wages not rising at the same level as inflation, and then therefore interest rates looking to creep up and then putting pressure on prices to the consumer. I don't think that's exclusive to the north. But what may be slightly advantageous to the north is, for those organisations who are looking at leased opportunities, premises, is lower rents and lower rates. Very quick example in the world of contract catering, where you don't, you provide a service basically to provide food service to your client. There are no rates, there is no rent. So the biggest single challenge to that environment is labour shortages, and then recruiting skilled labour on the back of that. Certainly since Brexit has taken place, and COVID-19, where people reassessed their life goals and decided to go and do something maybe a little less stressful. But coming back to the question, Clodagh, in terms of the biggest challenges, for me, in my experience, it's the one and only big issue is labour shortages. Now, although it's a challenge, I think there are some opportunities around that, and I think the hospitality industry has been leading the way on trying to recover some of those issues. such as employing recruitment tactics, by improving work-related benefits, flexible working environments, adjusting working hours and that kind of thing, to advertising via social media and partnering with vocational colleges to get people from college leavers to join the industry and so on. And you mentioned Kate Nichols. Yes, she's doing a great job trying to lead the way for UK hospitality in terms of recruitment. So it's not all doom and gloom. I think labour is a big issue, but there are opportunities for people to recover from COVID and post Brexit in terms of that labour shortage. It's just going to take time.
Sarah, I might jump onto you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Tony. I think there's been a lot of kind of chat about labour shortage. I was in Cumbria and I was in the Lakes and various Cotswolds, various different places that I think everybody went to coming out of COVID that was still in the country. And every single outlet, whether it was the fish and chip shop or whether it was the independently run hotel, had the little card in the window, help wanted or vacancies. So labour is definitely one, but that's not unique to the north of England or anywhere. I think education is massive. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Any opportunity I get, so I'm taking it now, just FYI, to say that the hospitality industry is a wonderful, not only job, but it's got a wonderful career opportunity. I bang on about that a lot. A lot of people look at the hospitality industry as being just hotels. That's not the case. There's so much more you can do. And then they say, oh, you can only go as far as, not everyone wants to be a general manager. And I'm like, hang on a second. It's not all about everyone wanting to be a general manager either. The scope is just, it's incredible. And if you have that kind of passion for the industry, you'll go very, very far if you really want to. Yeah, and lots of people, whether it's Kate or Fáilte Ireland in Ireland and around the world, do a great job of talking about hospitality being a great industry to work in. It's not all long hours, poorly paid, etc. But that is kind of sentiment that a lot of people think that it is. Yeah, I think that the kind of the maximizing working together is a big thing, that not working in silos. The hotels don't, in Newcastle or Liverpool or Durham or Hull, don't work in silos from the various wonderful attractions that are around them. I think working together can only benefit the entire locality. I think that's something that could definitely more could be made of that. More could be made of the walking, the biking, what Fergus mentioned about the dogs. That's a huge trend, and that's not a flash in the pan. That's here to stay.
Cool. Back to me. Yeah, all of the above. I'd say, a lot of experience of the hotels I work on, some of their competitors and friends, partner groups, is grow your own. Also work with a hotel down in Cornwall, and they're set on the North Cornwall coastline. They are employing out of work fishermen. Retraining them. If you want a well-cooked piece of fish, there's no better person than a fisherman, because they treat the animal properly and they never waste anything. Yeah, grow your own apprenticeships. I'd also say don't fret about university degrees these days. Even Google has killed the fact they only would employ people with MBAs, etc. So it opens the world to a more diverse and inclusive group. It's more about attitudes. And you train for skills, etc. A lot of on-the-job working. Yeah, apart from that, there's nothing really unusual, I suspect, about the north of England.
Can I just add on to that, Clodagh, please?
Yeah, of course.
It's linked to the point Fergus made about apprenticeships and so on, because I think it's quite key for those looking to invest in UK-based businesses, or any business for that matter. There might be people on this session who have school leaver age children, or children who are about to go to university or at university. I've got some children in that age group, and what I'm seeing quite a bit more of these days is more work based apprenticeships that are degree linked, though. So people are choosing to go to work, get paid, but they still want the qualification at the end of a 3, 4 or 5 year apprenticeship program, and that's because of the pending debt that comes with university. Certainly in the UK, £9,000 per annum. It's a lot of debt to be saddled with as a young person. And so seeing apprenticeships, work-based apprenticeships is a real opportunity. And I think that that's a real untapped opportunity in the hospitality sector. There are organisations that provide degrees, if you like, whilst working within hospitality. But if we really want to think differently about how we recruit the next cohort of hospitality workers going forward in this country, we've really got to look at how we make the most out of training and development opportunities. Recruitment is one strategic item that needs to be addressed. We touched on that earlier, but once you've got the employee, how to retain them, but giving them that incentive through great training and development opportunities, I think is absolutely key.
Great, thank you, Tony, for that. So I suppose there's quite a few Irish kind of businesses on the call, and a lot of them would be targeting businesses in the UK and maybe looking at the north of England to kind of reach out to or work with or partner with. So I just wanted to get kind of your opinion on, conducting business in the north of England. Like, what has your experience been like to date, or any insights or maybe unique aspects of doing business in the region that could help some of these businesses as they start to look at, targeting the north of England?
Shall I go?
Thanks, Tony.
I perhaps come at this from two angles. The north, perhaps unsurprisingly, a bit like my experiences of Ireland, is very sociable, very down-to-earth folk, not very complicated. And in my experience, the successful hospitality businesses they've done really well in the north. There've been those that have really understood that connectedness, that sociable aspect of the management and the approach, the mindset that the team take when welcoming guests into their premises, whether that's a hotel, bar, restaurant, nightclub, whatever it may be. I kind of use the guest in your own home philosophy to describe that mindset, that approach. That does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen across the rest of the UK and in the south, but certainly in the north, it's certainly more evident, because northerners are by very nature just a bit more easy to do business with, and more sociable and down to earth. So I guess we're all looking for an experience. Fergus talked about the experiences and that kind of stuff earlier on. We'll perhaps come on to a bit more of that later on. But that sort of experience of being looked after. So it's a service element, but it's a real kind of mindset, that kind of pub landlord, treating people like a guest in your own home, putting your arms around people. You get more of that in the north, without a doubt, than you get elsewhere. And then the second point I'd perhaps make is tapping into regional differences. From a food perspective, regional food tastes play a big part in the success of some businesses. So brands can be very successful. We all know that. Branded restaurants, branded bars and hotels. But being able to be flexible and tailor your offer to meet the local needs, I think, is a real unique selling point. So regional food tastes, where it's not one menu that fits all, as an example, is quite key. So from Staffordshire oatcakes to Parmos in the northeast, whatever it might be, it's really tapping into those local tastes to make a success of your operation.
Great, thanks, Tony. Sarah, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I totally agree with the local kind of aspect, and something unique, something, the whole farm to fork, or whether it's gin distillery. And I'm thinking about where I come from, Leitrim. I can't go through an airport anymore without seeing gunpowder gin, whether it's San Francisco or Dubai or Singapore or wherever it is in the world, but it always resonates with home when I see it. Yeah, the local piece is huge. whilst I think the likes of, all the different brands, whether it's Costa or Starbucks or, Nero or whoever, if you're talking about coffee, absolutely have a place in the world and in the various different cities and locations there is nothing quite like finding a local coffee shop with someone that will spend 30 seconds saying, how's your day and what brings you here and how you enjoying the area. And, oh, by the way, if you're looking for ABC, down the road is a great restaurant, or, across the street is a great art installation, or whatever it is. I always find that the things that local people tell you are the places that nobody really knows about. And it feels like a bit of a secret when someone local tells you it, and it really enhances the experience. So yeah, the local element for me is huge in hospitality.
Cool. Yeah, what to add to that? Yeah, fewer chains. There's more uniqueness, I would say. Yeah, the power of local is incredible. I'm also working with a hotel on the Isle of Islay, which has 9 whiskey distilleries. So if you're talking about local, you can just fat bike from one to the other. It might take you might need a taxi on the way home again, but you can certainly walk the beaches. So make the most of it. I mean, we're all Mongols these days, so none of us are really north or south or east or west anymore. We're all a hybrid, as we should be. So yeah, nothing more than that.
Great, thanks, Fergus. And I might stay with you for the next question, Fergus, to begin with, but it looks more on like a technology perspective, in terms of kind of the key trends you're seeing at the minute, and what you see for the future of the hospitality sector looking at technology. So I know you've worked with many hotel businesses, and maybe worked with developing new PMS systems or working with external partners. How do you see the tech landscape at the moment, and maybe where that's going?
Yeah, I'm happy to start on that one. It's kind of my horse land, I'd say yes. I mean, hospitality needs more tech. That doesn't necessarily mean fewer staff. It just means the same staff are doing a kind of more added value, customer-facing role, complementing the tech with people. I mean, in my early days in British Airways, I led the mobile channel. I mean, everything's mobile these days, and the hotels I work with, they're kind of virtually wall-to-wall online bookings. But the key thing is then, like 2 weeks before you arrive, you get a very polite email, and you do a lot of online self-selling or self-upselling to the spa, the events, kids zone. You do all that pre-arrival, so it kind of takes pressure off the reception staff when you arrive, but also gives the guest more control, because they can chat on the sofa at home weeks before they arrive. A lot more cloud versus on-prem. I'm helping a lot of companies take out the kind of legacy stuff, and legacy these days can be 10 years old, the age of some small children. That's legacy tech these days. I'm seeing a lot of legacy versus the old all-in-one solutions. The legacy stuff is now moving to a hybrid mix of things, so best of breed kind of plugging in together. And somebody, you guys on the phone will know this line, but APIs, application programming interface, it just means kind of polite way for systems to talk together. I'd say payment gateways are a huge thing at the moment. A lot of the partners I look at, the tech partners, have kind of white labeled payment gateways behind them. And so there's less grief for the hotel chains, kind of it's an all-in-one solution, so your finance team is a little bit happier. A lot more platform play versus standalone solutions. Things plug into things. And it's really healthy to see some of the newer PMSs in the marketplace that are definitely disrupting the legacy players. And I would mention News, RMS, Cloud, Apaleo. These guys are mobile first, API first. They're designed as a layer, and you plug and unplug. If you start disliking your PMS, you unplug it. And if there are tech providers on the call, please don't write another PMS. Please don't write another point of sale. I think the world has enough of both of those. There are plenty of other solutions you can kind of plug in. But I would look at the players, the platform players, the ones I mentioned, have marketplaces. So rather than an expensive partnership with some of the legacy players, you simply sign up to their partner program, and you follow their API rules, and you're listed on their marketplace, and sales will flow, providing you've got a nice complementary service. Yeah, and a lot of the startups that I knew a few years ago, including some of the northern ones, like people in the call will know Julie Grieve, who started Crichton, sold it out to Nonius. So start in one place, and you can pivot to other things. Yeah, I think that's the bulk of it. Oh, final thing. Yeah, internet booking engine is big, because that is a mobile experience for most people. But if there are vendors on the calls, don't even think about charging percentage of sales as your commission model, as your revenue model. It's got to be a fixed price, because the smaller boutique chains cannot afford the percentage of sales model.
Great, thank you, Fergus, for that insight. Tony, I might jump to you in terms of kind of the role that technology is playing at the moment from a catering side, and where you kind of see maybe technology helping you potentially in the skills shortages side.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I can speak about my current experience in the contract catering world. Where the use of big data has come into play quite a bit over the last few years. By big data, I mean facial recognition. So cashless technology at the till point. Not sure if that's too suitable for bars, restaurants, and so on, unless people want to choose to have accounts and pay as they go. But certainly in my current world, facial recognition is becoming quite a big player to recognise the customer at till point and make that debit from their account and do quite a speedy transaction. So it speeds up queue times, as well as helps to spread the resources. So if you're a man down on the till, then it really does help you to distribute those resources effectively, because you're relying on your big data to debit the transaction effectively. Again, whether that's got transferable opportunities onto the high street or not, I'm not too sure. I'll let others decide whether that's an opportunity.
Great, thank you. And I'm just conscious of the time here. We have about 3 minutes left, so I might just jump into probably one question, because a couple have come in, and then I will answer the others after today's session. So one has come in from Simon Hopper, and he's looking for food and beverage franchise partners across Leeds, Sheffield, and Northeast, and he was wondering if anyone on the call could recommend maybe business networks or groups where it could be good to connect with local people.
I'll just jump in there if to that question. Have a look at the Hospa group that's run by Jane Pendlebury, because that's got hundreds of UK hotels, pubs, restaurants, and a lot of those are the supporting vendors. So there might be something useful in that partnership group. And it's a very, again, back to the question about sociable hospitality. It's a very sociable community. They'll help and share where possible.
Great. Does anyone have anything else to add? No, perfect. So I know there's a couple of questions there that I might just come back to myself and answer, because I know we're at the 28 mark. So I just want to extend my thanks to our three speakers, Tony, Sarah and Fergus, for very generously sharing their time and their insights in today's session, and my gratitude to all of you joining the call today. We jumped into some really interesting subjects around technology and the kind of opportunities and challenges the UK and also the north of England are kind of presenting today amid those challenges that they're also facing. So as I already mentioned, I will send over the recording and also the slides from today's session. But thanks a million to everyone for joining, and have a fantastic remainder of your day.
Thanks, Clodagh. Thanks
Thanks, Marion.
Tony.
Thanks all.
Bye.